This panel will start with opening remarks from the Associate Deputy Undersecretary at the US Department of Labor, Molly McCoy.
Good morning, everyone. I'll start with my title. I'm the Associate Deputy Undersecretary of the US Department of Labor, which, as anyone would expect, is a US federal agency whose responsibility is primarily to protect the welfare of the workers in the US. But my bureau, the Bureau of International Labor Affairs, looks overseas. Our mission is to strengthen global labor standards, enforce labor commitments among our trading partners, promote racial and gender equality, combat international child labor, forced labor, and human trafficking. And a huge part of our work under that mission is to promote labor rights and combat child labor and forced labor in global supply chains in collaboration with government, NGO, and private sector partners. One of the main strategies within that work is to promote supply chain transparency and traceability, which helps companies identify and mitigate the risk of child and forced labor in their supply chains. And so that is why I am here today in a room full of experts on cobalt who know the details, the complexities, and the relationships of the DRC cobalt sector to talk to you about a topic that's close to my heart and central to my bureau, iLab's mission. And that's the importance of traceability and supply chain transparency in the critical minerals sector. So we all know critical minerals play a vital role in renewable energy technology, and that's a major part and a major challenge for the Biden-Harris administration. And personally speaking, I am in no place to deny the vital role that that plays in our daily personal lives, given that the first thing I'm going to do when I get off the podium is have water and then check both of my cell phones. And yet I also understand that these minerals are sometimes extracted under harsh conditions involving child and forced labor and other violations of worker rights. And as a lifelong advocate for labor rights and as a parent of a young child whose future on our planet worries me daily, I'm one of millions of consumers with a real responsibility to ensure that these minerals are sourced ethically. And so I find myself very fortunate to be at iLab, at the Department of Labor, where a huge part of our work is carrying out research on labor abuses worldwide to help companies pinpoint the risks in their supply chain. Many of you are probably familiar with iLab's list of goods produced by child labor and forced labor, because that's been a critical resource to all sorts of partners, from the NGO sector to the private sector and other governments, for many years. Recently, some of you may be aware that the US Congress expanded our mandate for the list, and they added new language that has asked us to research goods that are produced with inputs that are tainted with forced and child labor, not just the final goods wholly or produced by exploited labor. So if anyone in this room, and I imagine there's quite a few of you, works on government affairs with the US Congress or even around the world, you know that this requirement is not a one-off. It's not something particular to this presidential administration, but it's an indication of the widespread increasing interest in the sustainability of global supply chains, and it's a shift towards stronger human rights due diligence, and under President Biden, a major and consistent focus on the well-being of workers. So our new mandate helps companies and consumers identify the risks in their supply chain, like electric vehicles and cell phones that can face risks from their links to cobalt. Our new research methodology exposes complex supply chains by examining how inputs are processed, traded, and ultimately made part of the products that end up in the hands of American consumers. And you all know, and we've talked about it, that cobalt is often mined under horrific conditions, including by children. And since cobalt is a key ingredient for lithium-ion batteries made in China, DOL now lists that as one of the many goods on our list being produced with material made with child labor. As a result of our expanded mandate that I mentioned, for the first time, our 2022 list included cobalt and 9 other downstream goods. But that's just the beginning of our supply chain research. Our research is driving traceability by continuing to connect additional goods produced with forced or child labor through downstream products that use these goods as inputs. And though that list raises awareness, though, publicity, and we do a lot of press and a lot of communications every year when we publish it. The point is not simply to denounce. The point of that list and our mandates is to drive change, including in the cobalt sector. And we think it is possible for companies to responsibly source artisanally mined cobalt. That means formalization. ASM supports up to 2 million jobs in the Congo alone, but without formalization, we will all be standing back and watching a race to the bottom on labor standards. In contrast, we believe that formalization will standardize safety, environmental, and labor protections for these workers. So that's what we're calling on our allies and colleagues to do, to join us in supporting a formalization agenda. That means, for many of you, recognizing the existence of ASM in your cobalt supply chains. It means moving away from a de-risking model. It means integrating worker voice, high labor standards, and accountability for labor rights violations into the due diligence process. It also means working with mining cooperatives and with trade unions to improve labor conditions for Congolese mining communities. And we are here to support that evolution and that transition. We're working across the US government, we're partnering with the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and we're working with the private sector to push for a national standard that enshrines acceptable conditions of work in the sector. Standards need to ensure that supply chains are free of child labor and forced labor, and that workers can organize and bargain collectively. They need to guarantee that workers can mine safely and earn a living wage. And we hope to see the private sector commitment to a system that amplifies worker voice up and down the supply chain. The US is working directly with the DRC government to help address labor and occupational safety and health violations in mining across the sector, but especially in ASM. When our Deputy Undersecretary Thea Lee visited Kinshasa last year, she announced a new inspectorate capacity building project. Earlier this year, the Ministry of Labor hired over 2,000 inspectors and controller positions across 23 provinces, and we hope that those commitments will support the broader formalization agenda because strong labor enforcement and inspection is essential. Our commitment to partnering with the DRC government to build a sustainable cobalt sector includes ongoing and new project investment, and as I mentioned, a lot of research. Our Coteco project in DRC, for example, is currently piloting a child labor monitoring and remediation system in 15 cobalt mining sites. The system allows government officials, civil society, and communities across the Copper Belt to identify instances of child labor, conduct follow-up monitoring, manage the cases reported, and refer identified children to appropriate services. And we are delighted to announce that the Department of Labor-funded Global Trace Protocol project will soon pilot its newly developed traceability tool in DRC Cobalt. Field staff will be able to collect data on-site with a phone app, scan tags at each step of the supply chain, creating an uninterrupted digital record of chain of custody. With this tool, we hope to trace materials all the way back to the mines where they were produced to verify that no child or forced labor was used in their production. And we're eager to work with the government of the DRC to integrate our tracing tool with local initiatives like the Musompo Trading Center. The United States stands ready to partner with the DRC to ensure that all artisanal miners can work safely and earn a fair wage. We're also harnessing the power of technology in addressing labor issues, including child labor and the production of lithium-ion batteries. By using technology such as blockchain and other digital tools, we can create more transparent and accountable supply chains that are traceable from mine to manufacturer. We're also working with our government partner agencies like the US Geological Survey to leverage satellite technology and artificial intelligence to identify areas where child and forced labor may be occurring. Those are just a few of the examples of work that we're doing to combat labor abuses in green energy supply chains. But there's much more to be done. And we recognize that the visibility of our partnership and our commitment to the DRC is powerful. The resources that we're bringing to the table pale in comparison to the scale of the resources of many of the folks in this room. Companies have a huge role in ensuring that the materials like cobalt used in renewable energy technology are produced ethically and sustainable. And that's our call to action. We know that achieving supply chain transparency is challenging, and we welcome and we applaud the will to get it done. We've already seen companies take concrete actions to promote supply chain transparency in the critical minerals sector. These actions come at a time when countries like Canada are passing human rights due diligence laws, while the US is enforcing trade prohibitions to protect workers. These tools are powerful and motivating, and they make it clear that not taking action is irresponsible. And I cannot tell you how frequently in my daily work the question of mandatory due diligence and supply chain tracing comes up, and questions to me about what the US is doing and what are we looking at with Germany. And it's not just in critical mineral supply chains, it's in the garment sector, garments from Bangladesh, it's in auto parts from Mexico, but it is a daily conversation in our work. And at the same time, the US and our partners are catalyzing investment opportunities in the critical mineral supply chains that uphold labor and environmental standards. The Biden-Harris administration's Mineral Security Partnership and the Global Partnership for Infrastructure and Investment are tackling global infrastructure projects in critical minerals production to advance worker protections and drive inclusive economic growth. So all of us here today, from government officials, business representatives, and civil society leaders, we're in a singular position to signal to the world that transparent, verifiable, and responsible cobalt value chains free of child and forced labor are not only possible, but critical. I'm not going to leave this conversation here. We have an excellent panel that's coming up to talk a lot about the nuances and the complexities of the challenges in front of us. But what I will leave you with is the commitment of the US government to continue to support and partner with the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo to make this vision possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With a real call to action to lean into the situation rather than walk away and divest. And a call to action to this room and those who hold the resources in this room to join us in making it happen. So there was a lot of talk yesterday about Indonesia, but today it's really about the biggest, single-handedly biggest cobalt producer in the world that our market report confirmed continues to maintain over 70% of the cobalt production share. And therefore, it merits its own discussion, it merits its own day. And that's what we're here to do today. And what we try to do today is also to connect the different perspectives and the different partners and stakeholders vested in this agenda that have really committed to ensuring that we really achieve a transparent, verifiable, and responsible cobalt value chain in the DRC, but not solely for the purpose of achieving that, but also for the purpose of elevating standards in the DRC and supporting the Congo in its ambition to elevate the living standards for its own population. So with that, I'd like to thank again Molly McCoy for having really eloquently articulated the challenges, but also the potential to improve the situation and the good work that's been done. And our panel are going to delve into that a little bit more because many of them are on the ground working on that situation. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panel. We have Monsieur Mabolia and Madame Marie-Chantal Kaninda from Glencore. Take the second. And Chantal. We then have Assheton Stewart Carter from the Fair Cobalt Alliance. And Alexandra Cech from the Responsible Minerals Initiative. So thank you to our panelists for joining today. And as you can see, we have a breadth of perspectives here today. Each panelist brings their own unique perspective from the point of view of government, global mining, civil society working on the ground, multi-stakeholder initiative, again, working on the ground in the Congo, and a standard setter, both engaging on the ground, but also doing her best to meet all expectations and also representing the downstream. So I'd like to start with a quick fire round, just to warm us up and ensure everyone gets a chance to weigh in as fast as possible. So as concisely as possible and in one sentence, from your viewpoint, what do you think are the key elements to foster a transparent, verifiable, and responsible value chain? Mr. Mabolia, I'll come to you, and then we'll follow that order.
In French or in English, I should speak.
Would you like
my boss just told you a few minutes ago that it was very important that we all sit around a table to discuss about the matters that are in. So my view is that we have a God-given minerals that needs to be discussed among all the stakeholders in order to get the better of it for the Congolese people and for the rest of the population as well, the world as well.
Thank you. Marie-Chantal?
Thank you, Susannah. I would say that from our side, I think that first of all, the minister spoke about the laws in country. So it's about, of course, respecting the laws in country, especially when it refers to ESG. Mm-hmm. We talk about, from a Glencore's perspective, we talk about producing responsibly the commodities that advances everyday life. And it's about doing it in the DRC as we would do it in any part of the world. So having the same standards.
Thank you. Fabien?
Yeah, thank you again for having me here as a civil society organization, which is in field working on this topic. According to our perspective, some key elements that are needed to foster a responsible, transparent supply chain of DRC cobalt. I can say one thing is needed is to have an harmonized, a coordinated due diligence framework. I think yesterday and the day before yesterday, speakers talked about different initiatives, different frameworks, but in the field, I think it's necessary to have a kind of coordination of those initiatives and to have them more effective in the field. The second thing I can say, it's about transparency, because it's important that DRC cobalt supply chain must be transparent in some ways first, in terms of how the DRC government is granting mining licenses to companies, because this is important to have transparency and equitable procedures. The third point I can say relates to, let's say, a kind of framework on local content and CSR issues. Because according to us, DRC cobalt should, at the same moment, contribute to DRC people's sustainable development and meet the global demand in terms of green transition. So we need local content and the CSR to support both local economy and sustainable development for DRC people.
Thank you, Fabien. Assheton.
Great, thanks you, Susannah. And Susannah gave us lots of clues on how she's going to conduct this conversation, including the questions up front, but she didn't say we had to compress that into one sentence. So this is one sentence, but punctuated with many semicolons. So the Fair Cobalt Alliance obviously we acknowledge, as has the Minister this morning and others in the last couple of days, that cobalt, and this goes to many other minerals in the DRC as well, are a critical part of the energy transition. So our focus at the Fair Cobalt Alliance is that energy transition is just, which means it needs to include those communities that have very often in the past, when we've seen similar surges in mineral interests, have been excluded. And this, for the FCA, means the artisanal miners and their communities. And that's what responsibility means for us. The second thing it means is that in order to understand what is responsible, we need to define a operating framework, a path, if you want, so that we can enable those communities and those small-scale mine sites to be responsible and be acknowledged to be responsible, which does, of course, mean things like child-free sites, and it does mean not polluting, and it does mean living and working in safety conditions and so on. The third thing, punctuated just before that by a semicolon, is that this isn't just about the standards, of course. We can set standards, but we also need to invest in those improvements. Otherwise, we set the sector up for failure. And so this is a call for let's invest into those improvements, not just set our expectations too high and unavailable. And the fourth thing is responsible is that this isn't just about the mines in the DRC. The title of this session is about responsible value chain. And so this is about collaboration and how we can galvanize and mobilize the different industries and parties along that value chain to pool their resources, technology, finance to ensure that the DRC mining sector can be, as the Minister said, recognized as a responsible partner in the energy transition.
Thanks, Assheton. And we'll get a chance to unpick some of those points you've made very soon. Alex, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Susannah. To answer your question, I come back to the definition, which is having a transparent and verifiable responsible supply chain means that there's a greater understanding of the operators and the operating environments in the supply chain, including the midstream or the aggregation point and the upstream. And I think to best be able to do that, we need to see greater transparency and traceability. We need to see standards that outline best practice that can then be used as an assessment tool. And we need to see greater engagement and communication among supply chain partners.
Thank you, and thanks for the consideration. So just in rounding up, I think in terms of what we'll be unpicking today, so I have the importance of sitting around the table, respecting the laws, doing the same in the DRC as we do in other countries, issues around harmonization and coordinated due diligence, and then the need for best practice standards, transparency of licenses, just energy transition, child-free, safety, investment, and above all, collaboration. And I know it was a late night yesterday, but if anyone from the audience feels they have any other points that they feel are key to ensuring a transparent, verifiable framework, would you like to shout them out, just to make sure we've got a complete picture as we move in? Okay, so I think we've chosen the right panel because they're obviously able to echo what you have in mind. So let's dive into the true heart of the discussion. And I was a bit unfair with our panelists in that I tried to avoid too much over preparation, which is something I'm usually quite guilty of. So that we can have a more spontaneous and interactive discussion. So in terms of the flow of what we'll be discussing today, we'll be looking at the progress. I myself, in the past year, have visited the DRC, which is a priority country for the Cobalt Institute. I visited the DRC 4 times, and I'll be returning in June for a 5th visit for 10 days together with my colleague Marina, where we will be taking a delegation of media journalists and some other stakeholders to visit our member sites, as well as the artisanal community. And I'm certainly optimistic about progress, but so I like to be very positive about the way we engaged with the DRC, but also, cognizant of the fact that there are challenges. So we'll talk about progress, then we'll move to look at those challenges. But we'll also look at what are the solutions, because there's, in my view, and I think in the Cobalt Institute's view, there's too much focus on the negative and not enough focus on the positive and leaning into the situation. And certainly from our experience, we have been warmly welcomed to have an open and honest relationship with both the Congolese government, but also civil society stakeholders, as well as our own mining companies who invest on the ground. So I really would like the spirit of this conversation to be reflective, but also positive and forward-looking. And in that vein, I would like to turn to you, Marie-Chantal, to kick us off in terms of taking stock of progress on achieving this ambition of fostering a transparent, verifiable, responsible cobalt value chain in the DRC that benefits the Congolese and the wider cobalt industry.
Okay. Thank you, Susannah. Maybe I'll just start for the ones that do not know. Glencore has been in the DRC since 2007. So it's quite a while that we have been there. 2 mines, KCC, which is Kamoto Copper Company, and Mutanda Mining, that we call Mumi. We have gone through, of course, a lot of challenges, but at the same time, I think when it comes to cobalt, it's the place to be. Being the first producer of cobalt, the DRC contributes, our operations in the DRC contributes quite a lot, if not the major producer. Sorry. I would also say that we have gone through, yes, a lot of different phases, and even from the government side, I think today there's a lot of progress. We talk about governance, good governance. We talk about compliance. As a company, we have a very strong compliance program. It's a lot easier to implement it because we do have that dialogue with the government on those issues. We are part of the EITI, which is transparency. We declare all our payments to government. And even I would say that as a company, we do it even beyond, because every year, every end of June, I think, Glencore publishes a report of payments to government that we also share with the government in the DRC. There is also, I think, a problem of perception. For instance, a few weeks ago, I read somewhere that a journalist was confusing between cobalt and coltan. Mm-hmm. So there was an entire report on cobalt in the eastern part of the DRC. So I think that there is a need to better understand also the size of the country, the context of the country, and those issues. So perception is still there, but I think that as a company, we do talk about what we do, and there's a lot more that is being said. And I guess, look at the room today, there are a lot of people interested by the DRC, which shows that there is something positive. As a company, what we have done also is we are today able to recruit a lot more local Congolese, and at a very senior level, which I think makes it also very positive, something that we didn't have in the past. What we are also, as a company, able to do today is to contribute a lot more in the economy, and even in the local economy, with specific programs like development of local entrepreneurs in the Lualaba province. So what we do is we ensure that the local supply increases every day. So for instance, today we are at 40% of our local supply from the Lualaba province, which I think it's not too bad. It has been a lot of progress, but we are still working to increase that by transfer of capacity to those local entrepreneurs, ensuring that we support them for financing, because it is also sometimes an issue around financing, And I would also say that we equip them not only to give us as a company local supply, but they can work with any other company. And this, I think, it's to look at the longer term. I would also add maybe to that we, of course, support the FCA on the ASM side. I think that there is also some progress on that. And as a company, of course, we do not, we call it a coexistence model, which is we do not sell or we do not buy from artisanal mining, but we support responsible mining, and we do it through the FCA, and I'm sure that Assheton will be able to talk a lot more about that. But as a company, what we do also is we know that children during summer holidays, and that's a good example of what we do, we know that children during summer holidays would rather join their parents in artisanal miners, for those that have parents working in artisanal miners. But if they join them in the summer period, they might not want to go back to school in September. So what we have done is we have created summer camps, for instance. So during summer holidays, we take those, we get those children into the summer camps. Not only do they have food, they play, they are all together, we really support them. And that's really to ensure that they do not go back to artisanal mining. One thing also that is positive today is there is now a better understanding of the difference between artisanal mining and industrial mining, which did not happen in the past. I spoke earlier on about the EITI, and those transparent issues are a lot more positive for the country. And the reason why is the contracts are published today. All the licenses are published today, and I guess that Mr. Mabolia will be able to speak about that better than myself. And those are the issues that are positive for us, and I'll pause here.
Thank you very much, Marie-Chantal. So, Assheton, I'm going to come to you as the Fair Cobalt Alliance that Marie-Chantal mentioned and that Glencore is a member of, but also as, you know, a person who has been working on this agenda for a long time in other minerals, including gold, and who you know has a commitment to the agenda in the DRC more widely. Where do you see progress to date?
Great, thanks. Yes, I'd love to talk at length about the progress we're making on the ground with the FCA, the Fair Cobalt Alliance, and we do have a website where you can go and have a look at that, because one of our commitments is that we share all our progress and how the money is spent with the DRC government and online as well. But, you know, although some people think that this is a very sticky problem, I think we have shown, as has others like our friends at Trafigura at their Matoshi site, that you can make progress on artisanal mining sites to improve those practices if you pay attention. So yes, you can go to these sites and you won't see children there. You will see PPE being applied. You will see that there are trained safety captains. You will see that there are first aiders and first responders. You do see outside those fences groups of miners who are saving some of their earnings and making progress. Of course, one of the biggest challenges is making sure that the depth of those pits are kept to the legal site. But I'd love to talk about that, and happy to talk about that in coffee. But I think one thing I'd like to reflect on, Susannah, talking kind of more broadly about artisanal mining and how it's perceived, is the narrative around artisanal mining. I think in about 2010, I wrote a 10-year reflective on the work that the World Bank had been doing on artisanal mining, and I labeled it from outlaw to in-law. because the interventions of the World Bank and other institutions had been from a negative place. It says, here we have a problem, we've got to solve the mercury problem, or we've got to solve the child labor problem, or the illegal occupation of land problem. But they didn't see artisanal mining as a legitimate activity, but rather a spontaneous and corrupt activity run by outlaws. That has now shifted, and that's why I said it's in-laws, and that we still might have issues with our in-laws, but we are recognizing them as a part of our family, as a part of the sector. And so that's, I think, the positive change that I see. Artisanal mining, especially as prices go up, will attract more people. Artisanal mining is a different deposit than large-scale mining, not in the cobalt specifically, but can be different deposits, target deposits in large-scale mining. It has different factors of production. It has different technologies or no technologies at all. So it's a different industry, but it still has a place if it is done responsibly. It is here to stay, and it has a future, is the way we approach it. And so when you have the narrative around it from international publications and press, which picture it in a negative tone or as victims, that doesn't allow you to do what we're trying to do with the Fair Cobalt Alliance and the cobalt mining areas of the DRC. So we need to shift that narrative, and I'm glad to hear that is happening. And you heard the remarks of Molly this morning, very clear from the government of the US, moving away from the de-risking model, Molly said. This isn't about risk. Risk is really, when companies talk about risk, they mean risk to themselves. We need to think about risk to the communities. If you want to address risk to the communities, you need to address those impacts at the root of doing that. And that means, as Molly also said, working with those cooperatives, as we are doing in Kamalombwe, where that cooperative has responsibility for 8,000 souls, and trying to improve their lives as well. And that all starts with this narrative. You'll see out in the foyer out there photographs taken by my colleague David Sturmes of artisanal miners. On first glance, you might think that that is anathema and their working conditions look very tough, but I urge you to take a look again and look at those faces of those men and women in those photographs, and you'll see, I hope, people have made a choice a choice and to accept the risks of some of the conditions on artisanal mines, to strive for better livelihood, to provide for their families. And they too, of course, want to work in better conditions and live a more dignified life. Look too in those photographs and you see they have a life outside of those mines. They don't just wear mining clothes, but they also go out at night and enjoy life with their families. So these aren't objects, these are people and these are communities. And we should consider them in that light and see how we can enable them to build better and more responsible businesses in the DRC cobalt mining fields. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And if you haven't had the chance to enjoy the exhibition outside, and thanks very much to David, who's at the back of the room, for enabling that, and to the Fair Cobalt Alliance, please do go and spend some time, because they are really powerful images, and certainly compare quite differently to some of the images we see in the media. Not to say some of the images in the media are all incorrect, but it is very much towards the negative when, as Assheton said, there are some good stories and there are, people behind them. But Alex, as a representative of the downstream and of standard setting, can you enlighten us on your view of where progress has been made?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Cech, and I represent the Responsible Minerals Initiative. And we are a membership organization of over 500 member companies, and we're also a standard-setting body. And our goal is to find mutually beneficial solutions to these supply chain issues. And that means working with the midstream and working with the upstream to establish what we can define as best practice in terms of responsible sourcing. We subsequently develop standards for assessments tools and then guidance for our members to really promote these best practices that we've identified. And over the past few years, we've worked with these partners in our supply chain. For example, we've worked with the Responsible Cobalt Initiative, or RCI, to develop the Cobalt Refiner Due Diligence Standard. And this is a set of shared expectations for what the management systems at cobalt refiners should be to enable them to demonstrate to their supply chain partners and stakeholders that they are sourcing responsibly and in line with law and international expectations. Standards like these are really important signals to the market, to regulators, and to supply chain partners and stakeholders that a very specific entity is complying with these international best practices and with the domestic law in country. And we find that they're really helpful in terms of opening access to global markets and maintaining access to global markets. To date, we've actually seen really impressive uptake of this Cobalt Refiner Due Diligence Standard. Since its initial development and consultations in 2018, 2019, and 2021, we now have approximately 40% of the crude refiners or treatment units in the Democratic Republic of the Congo that are participating in our RMAP program, and over 60% of fine refiners globally participate in this program. So we have a very large coverage of the cobalt supply chain, and that's been really important, especially when Susannah highlighted that we need to talk about the progress that's been made and what we've effectively been able to do over the last few years. In terms of artisanal and small-scale mining cobalt, what we've tried to do is really take a similar approach and work with the stakeholders who understand these issues and the root causes, as Assheton said best. We've worked with the Ministry of Mines, and we've tried to work with other industry organizations, such as the Global Battery Alliance, the Fair Cobalt Alliance, the Responsible Cobalt Initiative, and NGOs like Impact, as well as many others, so that we can establish a shared set of expectations. Having this shared set of expectations helps us to unify the market, and it really helps us to make sure that there is, again, that clear market signal that a site is performing at the expectations that we've all aligned on and agreed upon. In terms of this ASM Cobalt Normative Framework, as we've titled it, we've carried out a global consultation, which included over 200 stakeholders in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as well as globally, to consult and share their feedback on these expectations. And it's really important to highlight that we've essentially highlighted what was already established in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is the Certified Trading Chains, or CTC requirements, and we've highlighted what's in the DRC Mining Code. So there is a clear understanding that if you are aligned with the ASM Cobalt Framework, you're aligning with domestic law as well as international best practice, and we've essentially reformatted this a bit so that there is a progressive framework in place. We understand that change to the ASM Cobalt sites will not happen overnight. There are many challenges to be addressed, and there are many root causes that have to be understood to be effectively addressed. But by laying out these shared expectations in a progressive style, what we can show is the milestones that get reached in terms of working towards achieving alignment with the overall expectations. And milestones are important. They're a key signal, again, to the investors who may want to invest in these sites. You know, as Assheton highlighted, there's a lot of investment coming into the site at Kamalombe. You want to be able to show that there's milestones reached and progress made. You also want to be able to have a clear and transparent understanding of what conditions are at these sites and where improvements can be made and targeted so that you can monitor, you know, you need improvements to occupational health and safety or personal protective equipment. You can make those trainings and investments available, and then you can monitor for progress over time. So we feel that this is really an important tool and an important step forward for industry, that we've aligned on these expectations, that we can promote greater transparency in the supply chain by establishing these and assessing sites against this framework. And we really hope that this will enable us to make some of the changes that we hope to see in the sector.
Thanks, Alex. And Mr. Mabolia, having listened to panelists before you and from a government perspective, where do you believe progress has been made? Where does your government feel that progress has been made today?
I think it speaks for itself, all they said, so I don't know if I have to add more to what they said. But listening to them, what comes to my mind is what we need, me as a Congolese today, is to capture the industrial sovereignty of minerals. I think that we should concentrate as the government to manage much more better for our people these God-given materials. So when people are speaking about artisanal, it's a situation that comes out of the failing of our industrial mining in the past, which now is coming back, but unfortunately that we are not paying too much attention into it. And when people are talking about transparency, so all these elements, it's good, but yet, like Assheton said, look at the pictures down there that you've seen. These are people are happy that they're fine, but they need to go to a greater level. And so this human capital needs to be taken into action. We have said all along that those people need to have access to the bank, to credits and everything. So artisanal has to progress. And we are working in this direction to progress. We said that we want to have a fond de crédit minier and things like that. So to progress so they could get a better. And also, it comes out to the infrastructure. These are elements that are very important. When you said, okay, you want to have a responsible, verifiable elements, but you have to see that from one point of where the artisanal activity is, and at one point where they go and sell it, there might be 10 kilometers that people have to walk, or sometimes there is no roads. So it's still very difficult condition for those people. So verifiable, yes, but also to improve this condition by having what Minister said today, we are structuring our investment through infrastructure. So it has to come, and then more and more with every infrastructure investment that will come has to have all these elements of electricity situation, because we have that problem, elements of roads to be built, or we can't get some roads to be built. So otherwise, for the rest, we are working closely with all the gentlemen around here. And like we said, we need more talking around so we can have a better light to where we're going.
Thank you. And thank you for your honest reflections. And I think what that does is sort of, and I'll come to you in a minute, Fabien, it kind of takes us into that reflection on progress, but also with an eye towards what are some of those challenges. So as the civil society representative, who in the past few days I've learned, is here to keep us honest and accountable, I'd like to give you the opportunity to reflect on some of the comments that have been made today, but also perhaps to start to address some of the challenges and the ambition of the government that Mr. Mabolia set out.
Yeah.
With you.
Yeah, of course, as the panelists said, there are some progress points on which stakeholders can build to improve DRC mining sector, in particular Cobalt sector. We have been working on DRC mining sector for, I can say, 15 years ago. I can say some of the progress we have seen. First, we have the legislation that has been improved. I can mention here, like Her Excellency mentioned, the revised mining code that has been passed in 2018. That new mining code tried to domesticate some international standard on due diligence. For instance, OECD guidelines have been included in DRC mining law. The second progress I can mention is about transparency through EITI, like Ms. Chantal said. We have today a tool that can help to have some information published, like contracts, like revenue, but also other information. So I can say those 2 points are important as progress on which we can build to improve the situation. But in terms of challenges, yeah, some of the challenges we have seen, I can say first, it's implementation gaps of existing regulations. We have, as I said, a good law in terms of mining activities, but the implementation in the field is still poor. That's the first point. And even for international standard, as I said, we have different, we are seeing different initiatives which are not more coordinated. That is, I can say, problem in terms of how to be effective in the field. Another challenge we have seen, I can say, relate to engagement of stakeholders on those issues. As you know, DRC Cobalt sector is now, let's say, dominated by Chinese companies. This is a reality. But in terms of effective engagement with stakeholders, it's still problematic to have frank, candid dialogue with stakeholders. That is one challenge we have seen. And now the challenge I can mention, Her Excellency mentioned it, it's about the management of mining revenue. Through the revised mining code, some revenues, in particular mining royalties, are paid to local government, to provincial government, and to national government, and including other revenues. The way those revenues are managed is still problematic because, like Mr. Mabolia said, DRC mining resources should contribute to DRC people development, sustainable development. And that's the problem we have today. The traceability of, yes, we have information through EITI, but how money is spent. That is still, I'd say, I can say a big challenge on that. Another challenge we have identified is related to human rights issues. Mm-hmm. I can say that those issues in DRC mining sector are still not very taken into account in mining operation. Let me give some concrete example. When it comes to relocate populations which are living on a mining site, the way people are displaced, we have some case of evictions where people have been not compensated fairly, where people have not been resettled. Those are problems we are seeing in the field on how to improve that. The other challenge I can say, let's say it's about, the reason why I asked this question on Tuesday, the question about corruption, the questions about tax avoidance. We have been carrying out and supporting some fiscal case studies to better understand how mining companies are paying tax to the US government and how the US government is managing revenues. Some of the findings of our research show that there are some mining companies which are using some practices to reduce or to avoid paying tax to the DRC government. And corruption also, as I mentioned, in terms of the process of granting mining license, in terms of, as you know, many mining projects in DRC are joint venture between DRC state-owned companies and foreign investors. The way how those deals are negotiated, the way how shares are between DRC and those mining companies. So we have problems in terms of corruption. We need to tackle them, those issues. And also, as I said, tax avoidance, how to ensure that mining companies are paying what they should pay to the DRC government and how the DRC government is managing those revenues, I can say.
Thank you, Fabien, for keeping us grounded and reminding us that there are still challenges and a long way to go. And on that, I'd like to give the first word in terms of talking about these challenges, but also perhaps reflecting on some of the points made by Fabien to Marie-Chantal.
Thank you, Susannah. The way we look at it, it's true that there are challenges, but the challenges are there. How do we overcome those challenges? Because just nailing the challenges and living with them without doing anything, I don't think that it will help us advance in the way we work. So it's true that the challenges that we see are, of course, a lot more infrastructural challenges. Not enough roads, for example, in exports of some of our products or imports as well, which sometimes delay in the production. It's true that having the railway would be of a big importance. I would maybe add to that is maybe the tax law being a bit old and having a new tax law a lot more clear would certainly bring a lot less dispute. And maybe that's to respond to one of the points made by Fabien here. I mean, having advisors who constantly accuses people, I don't think that that's the right way to go for it. So really having a new tax law would be of a benefit for the companies operating in the DRC, and I guess for the environment as well. We talked about electricity, and I think that this came from Paul Mabolia. And it's true that electricity can be an issue, but we have, as a company, tried to resolve it with an investment that we did a few years ago by KCC and MUMI at the Yenga Dam, rehabilitating 2 turbines. And not only rehabilitating those turbines, I think it's G27 and G28, but also transporting that electricity from Yenga to Kolwezi, more than 1,000 kilometers, transporting 450 megawatts of electricity, of which 50 megawatts is due to the town of Kolwezi. So those are the ways that we try to address those infrastructure problems. Of course, the communities living around our operations are usually very poor. And what we do, we ensure that when possible, we hire people from those communities. We have very strong CSR projects to help develop those communities. And there is a big emphasis on women as well. For instance, what we have done at KCC, we have taken women, the ones that were willing to do it. We have taken them from artisanal mining and helped them, supported them in creating other cooperatives in restoration, in agriculture, in sewing, and in other sectors. So I would say that there are still challenges, and there are a lot of challenges, not always an easy environment, but what we do is we engage a lot with the various stakeholders to ensure that there is a constant communication and discussion to see how best we can come out from all those issues and challenges. So I would say that when you want to operate in a country like the DRC, of course, perception challenges, but it is about, we know that there are challenges, but what do we do to overcome those challenges? Thank you, Susannah.
Thank you very much, Marie-Chantal. And I think that's a good way of sort of combining the challenges, but also thinking ahead around what do you do with those challenges and what are some of those solutions. So Alex, in that vein of challenges and solutions together, what more could work? Can I come to you?
Sure, of course. Yes, I was going to say there's not too much more to add in terms of correctly outlining all of the challenges that we're working on. But I think it's really important to, as we said, take some next steps. First, I think it's incredibly important that we try to engage and have more clear communication around how we're progressing and how we're going to be working together. We've often heard, especially as a downstream representative, that it's the downstream expectations that get met, or downstream that feels the benefits. And that's very much something that we're working to address. We want to make sure that the midstream and the upstream are feeling the benefits of these improvements that we're trying to make and these solutions that we're putting forward. And we want to make sure that we're hearing the voices at the table in terms of broader stakeholder engagement. And I think that's absolutely one of our biggest goals. And I think as actors working in this space, what we'd have to try to commit to is to have more honest and clear, open communication to make sure that we're providing very clear, coherent messaging to stakeholders so that when they ask us what is happening, what is changing, we're able to answer that and we're able to share this narrative more clearly. And I think one of the third pieces, and maybe it hasn't been highlighted as much, but time is such a challenge. And I think the two things that I just highlighted will hopefully help us with that in terms of communication and collaboration. But it takes time to build relationships across your supply chain. And it takes time to build trust and to develop these relationships globally, and to better understand the root causes of these challenges that we face. But time is also of the essence. And I think that we need to continue to push ourselves to make progress and to expedite the progress that we're seeing and making in the supply chain so that we can really see more impacts and come back next year and talk about more progress that we've made. So I hope that's something we'll all try to keep in mind.
Thanks, Alex. And certainly at the Cobalt Institute, we very much welcome that clear and honest communication, open and honest communication about progress to date, because it's one of the questions that we get asked by international media, by stakeholders, by the downstream, whenever there's some issue that unfolds, usually in the media, where we struggle sometimes to capture that collective progress, to demonstrate the amount of investment and effort that's been taken to date. So certainly we continue to work with yourselves, with the FCA, but also the other initiatives engaged in this to try and achieve that that aspiration of being able to communicate that collective progress on the ground, and also to the Congolese people, because I think they need to know what progress has been made as a result of, foreign governments, foreign initiatives, downstream efforts. Assheton, would you like to come in here?
Yeah, so maybe a couple of challenges and a couple of opportunities. From the Fair Cobalt Alliance perspective, I think the biggest challenge we have at the moment is to get clarity on the legal status of artisanal miners, because I mentioned before that if we want to improve, which we do, the conditions, working conditions of the miners, we need a flow of capital. To get a flow of capital, it needs to have some security around it. Artisanal scale mining, cobalt mining, is a billion-dollar industry at export. It's of interest, and once we get that clarity, I think we'll get more investment into improvements. That's why we set aside some of our resources to help get some clarity for a particular mine we're working on in Kamalombe, and it's not straightforward, and it takes time. So that's kind of on the ground and continuing. Reflecting a bit more on the due diligence, which is now part of my life, I work a lot in. I think one of the challenges here I see is around due diligence seeking to drive development changes. But it's a bit like what in the neuropsychiatry field they call kind of left brain versus right brain thinking. Left brain thinking is very good at categorizing and making things particular, breaking things into parts. The right side brain is very good at holistic understanding of a situation. What I see the due diligence information flow is really very much left brain thinking. It's making things very particular. It's focusing on one or two issues. It can be very, very narrow and creates myopia if you're not careful. So that's the risk. And without that context, that information, when it flows downstream, can be misunderstood, and it can lead to decisions that aren't appropriate. You have to understand child labor in the context of poverty. You have to understand the low operating standards in the context of low capacity. If you don't have that information, then that goes back to the narrative, which is inappropriate and unhelpful. So I think we've got to really watch how we use due diligence and compliance instruments as a proxy for development interventions and positive change that we want to make. On the opportunities side, I brought up in my first intervention, collaboration. Using example, 20 years ago, I started one of the first multi-stakeholder groups. 20 years ago, it doesn't show my age. I actually started my career very, very, very young. But that collaboration was around 5 NGOs and 5 companies getting around the table to talk about biodiversity. And when we started that, it was almost unheard of, and the companies came into the room accompanied by their legal teams, and they didn't want to talk to the NGOs, and there's lots of standoffs. But 20 years on, we know how to do that, and the opportunity is there to collaborate in what is called this pre-competitive environment. So I think we should grasp that opportunity for all these things that have come up over the last few days, which have the potential to tarnish the reputation of the industry, are going to be solved if we act in concert. And so I think we should make special effort to do that. And the second opportunity, I think, is, I started this little over 20 years ago, and there are other sectors which have done similar things and made advances. In the gold sector, we work in the colored gemstone sector, in the diamond sector, and it sometimes worries me how we don't seem to read our history books and learn from those, but there are many examples that we can learn from what has gone well and what has gone less well, and become more efficient at finding these solutions. So that's another opportunity I see.
Thank you, Assheton. And I'll be opening the floor to Q&A in a couple of minutes, but before that, I'd like to return the word to you, Mr. Mabolia. Perhaps I've seen you taking some notes, listening to some of the comments from our panelists, so I'd like to give you an opportunity to reflect and comment, or to add something more.
Yes, thank you. When it comes to the situation on the ground, the mining code of the latest one changed a lot, in a sense that we did more for the artisanal mining than the previously mining code. And in effect, today, we have, I think, 136 companies, mining companies, that have to pay the 0.3% of chiffre d'affaires that Madame the Minister talked. So there is money dwindling into the community. The challenge today is to get a good project. So you're talking about artisanal miners, as you know, that are not always well educated, but also with dire conditions of poverty and everything. So the community, the due diligence, everything, you have to look at how could we get very quickly a project on the ground so we could implement it. I believe this is the challenge that we have now. Money is there, but we don't have a good challenge project. And I look at the situation, for example, in Katanga. We hear that there is a maize crisis right now, maize. And then here we have mining companies could, I believe, also together work at getting some, not Congolese, some people that are well-trained, and then to direct them on this livelihood independence of, fostering to get some champions of, 5 or 6 agricultors could do a lot of, coupled with the artisanal mining. So to me, there is we have to be more innovative now to go into more innovations instead of just staying on all these standard discussions that we have. There is new ways there. Exploration, like the minister said, is lacking of exploration. But not only we have to do through the Service Géologique National, but mining companies, I do not really see a lot of them talking about research that they're saying on all big area that they controls. And then we could maybe say, okay, this one, they could already give us the information, and then we turn it into a local, artisanal mining situation. So there is opportunities there. We have to have new ideas that always all the same. We have done this, we have done that, we have done that, but on the ground we still have a problem. Artisanal mining has to be humanized more and like. And then again, when you go to a camp, an artisanal camp, an area, you can see that there is no proper water. There is no roads, like I said. Conditions are difficult. And all of this, we also have to look at it. And when we have now the NGOs and everything, the difficulty that we have is to get them together. Everybody comes on his own. There is like a clause. And then you will see they all come to the minister and said, we want to do that at Kasulo. But you have 5 NGOs, they all want to only work into Kasulo instead of there is a lot of places. And then this difficulty that we have is to get them together. They don't come and they say, oh, we are part of this government, we only answer to that one and everything. So it makes it very difficult for us to be able to have a good strategy and everything. So there's also need to have more interaction, like we keep on saying, this platform of communications in between us, everything. EITI, like you said, corruption, all these elements, I will not go into it. It's up to civil society. They like to talk about that, so there is no comment from me on that one. All we hope that is improving the situation, and as you can know, today in the media, you'll see not only this EITI, but we have a lot of now with Inspection des Finances and everything. And today we are going to have also Inspection Générale des Mines to help us also to have more control. So progress are being made. And you talk about clarity about the law. Is that what you said, Assheton? For the artisanal mining, you want clarity?
What did I talk about?
Legality.
Legality.
And clarification on
clarity.
clarity on the legal status.
I couldn't understand that, but anyway, we had a seminar not a long time ago at Zongo, looking at how this new mining code has been implemented for more than 5 and 6 years. We saw some areas where we need to tune it up a little bit to get more, like we said, the situation, so it could be more easy to do. You said that the fiscal law was old. You know that everything is in the mining code. So when it's out of mining code, it's out of our scope, then it has to be a finance minister or something like that. Simple as that.
Thank you.
But we are open.
Thank you, Mr. Mabolia. And just picking up on 2 of the things you mentioned, I think we appreciate and acknowledge the amount of interest there is from foreign governments, NGOs, companies themselves, the downstream, and therefore the, if you like, proliferation of initiatives that we've seen crop up in the cobalt industry, particularly in the DRC. And certainly at the Cobalt Institute, we're very committed to bringing those voices together and trying to achieve more alignment and harmonization, coordination, dialogue across these initiatives, so that we're all moving towards one goal and in a coherent way. We certainly tried to do that at the OECD forum, which happened 2 weeks ago in Paris, where we convened together with the RMI a side session, a partner session at the request of the OECD itself to convene an ASM Cobalt session, and of course senior government officials from your government as well as civil society, FCA, other initiatives participated. And that was one of the first times that everyone got together and really spoke. And I think it paves the way to address some of those concerns that you mentioned. And we would certainly look to continue to support you on demystifying, but also coordinating some of those challenges. And with that, I'd like to turn it to the floor. And I don't know who's going around with the mic, but if I can ask you to please state your name and your organization, and if possible, be quite brief, because we are moving into the last final 10 minutes of the session. So I can see. Yes, thanks, Peter. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Peter Handley from the European Commission. I would just first like to say that the point made by Madam Minister and yourself about everyone needing to be sitting around the same table is absolutely right. And from the European Union's perspective, this is exactly what we have in mind with the creation of the Critical Minerals Club that President von der Leyen has announced, and which forms part of our Critical Raw Materials Act, and where we want to put producer countries and consumer countries together to talk about the shared goals and how we can mobilize the necessary investments to make a just transition possible. So that message is well received. The question I have, given what the Minister and yourself have talked about the vital thing for you is developing value in country, is please tell us how the European Union can help you to put the right kind of investments and partners together to help precisely with moving into the industrial transformation area that you have talked about as one of your needs. Thank you.
Thanks, and Peter, thanks for bringing that up, because that was my reserve point in case we didn't come to it. So I think it's really important that we address it. So over to you, Mr. Mabolia, to talk more about how the European Union can support you in the DRC's vision to build more in-country value addition. The Minister herself mentioned the Congolese Battery Council that we had the pleasure of meeting on our last trip to Kinshasa. So how can this relationship with the European be productive towards that goal?
We had the Europeans a few months ago. How could I say that? Vous savez, you know, when two elephants are fighting, the herbs downstairs is suffering. You have Chinese bloc, European blocks, and then you have the others. Madam said, we go to one country, everybody speaks the same. So why don't we get together? So we had the European technicians talking to my people, and then it was still not clear what exactly you guys want from us. We have the one who have the resources, not you. So you came to us and then said, how could we do that? We said, okay, today we have our minerals are going from DRC 85% straight to China to be refined, and then from China it goes to other countries to be transformed, and everything. Ultimately it comes to Europe. Europe, what do? They start changing the laws, and then, you know, selling everything. What we said, why don't you come and Kinshasa? What we need is refinery when we need these value-added materials to our product. So you have the technology, we have the minerals, so come to us with the technology ready to build, let's say, for example, the germanium, Konkola. I think it's Konkola, the technology of Konkola. Germanium is in Congo, and then our material goes all that way to Finland, Konkola. Long time ago, Gécamines had a contract with Konkola Finland. Today, that, at the end of the day, we could look at some part of this refinery of these elements could be done in Congo. We had more value, we had more people to work, and then everything. So this is concrete example. You had Umicore that was there in Belgium, and then the plant went and be sold to Poland, I believe, KGMC. But we could also, given the relation that we have Gécamines, our mining company that is there. We can make a good PPP partnership to put it up, because I always speak about industrial sovereignty, that we want to have it back, this one. We have to be able to have at least 20,000, 40,000, 100,000 built by Congolese for the Congolese people. I mean, not only for mining companies could be there, but we have to go back to our state-owned companies, private companies, Congolese companies, pop up production. And this European could come and then help it very simple as I said.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is it's not only the support from the European Commission, but also from the European companies who need to demonstrate their willingness to invest in the country and help you with your vision. Are there any other questions or reflections? I know many of you actually work on this agenda actively, so you may have observations rather than questions. Is there anyone, I'm sorry, I can't see, but it's very bright. Is there anyone who would like to ask anything? Have we truly exhausted all our topics?
We are bored, or
I think you might.
There's nothing to say.
Can I make a comment on
Yeah. It seems like, oh, sorry, was there
No,
a
sorry, we're
point?
going over to...
Yeah, just a comment about the question that was asked by your opinion. I think, like Ms. Mabolia said, from our perspective, I think there are something that European Union and other stakeholders can do in DRC to support DRC government. Ms. Mabolia mentioned a question about energy supply. That is a big challenge in DRC. If we need more added value to DRC mining, to DRC Cobalt, we need local processing and local transformation. And so far, we need more energy supply. I think other stakeholders can support DRC. I think there is a program, a strategy that DRC is putting in place, how to improve energy supply. That's an idea that comes out to my mind. The second point, I think Assheton mentioned it about ASM. Our understanding of the issue is that we have two or three challenges. First, how to have, let's say, viable ZDA at solar mining zones. That's a challenge today. And the problems we have between mining companies and miners is that because miners do not have viable, effective zones to do their activities. How to support the government to have those zones? That can be a way. Another issue related to cooperatives. Like Ms. Mabolia said, according to the revised mining code, miners have to create a sort of cooperative where they can operate. And today, we have problems in terms of having really cooperatives that are operated by miners themselves. How we can support them? And finally, the issue of access to funding. Because having a cooperative making ASM activities requires money. until many miners do not have access to funding, we'll have problems. So that are some ways the government can be supported to improve the governance, to ensure that mining minerals are processed locally and transformed locally. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Fabien. And before I close, we certainly at the Cobalt Institute welcome the government's initiative around the cobalt value chain. We know our members, both within the DRC and outside the DRC, welcome this. And we certainly see, this as a way to develop alternative livelihoods, to maintain value addition in country. We know that countries like the US government, but also at the EU bloc are committed to this initiative. So we look forward to continuing this discussion and finding ways to make that ambition a reality. But I'm just going to bring us back to the topic of our conversation, not that we actually strayed off topic, because I believe it's all relevant, but DRC fostering a transparent, verifiable, responsible cobalt value chain. Let's move forward to 2030. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to say, bearing in mind it's never a perfect world, but will we have achieved it by 2030? Mr. Mabolia.
Why are you always starting by me?
Because
What did you say?
Government.
I don't have time to think when you're saying that.
okay, we can finish with you. It's a yes or a no, really. It's a yes or a no answer.
No, we can achieve by 2030.
So it's a yes?
Yes, we can achieve.
Marie-Chantal?
I would say yes, because as a responsible company, we have already today very high standards that we are already implementing in the DRC. So I would say transparent, yes. Verifiable, I would say yes, because KCC is RMI compliant. MUMI is being on its way to be compliant. Responsible cobalt value, I would say yes, because of our strong implementation of the ESG.
Thank you. So you're in the middle here, Fabien. I didn't want to end with you. I
can say yes, but if.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Very.
If we improve governance, all things we are talking here, if we have effective commitment, effective engagement of stakeholders to improve the supply chain, yes. But if we don't improve, unfortunately, we can say no.
Thank you. Assheton?
Of course, because by then the international media will be reporting in a more contextualized way about the benefits of artisanal miners for the Congo. And by then, NGOs would have got around the table, like Mr. Mabolia was talking about, to build a sustainable mineral landscape in the Laba region and finding good projects to work on. By then, downstream OEM companies will have committed to buy cobalt from responsible ASM, which is verified by the RMI's standard. By then, the government's initiatives to create a policy framework which is truly enabling will be proven to be implemented. And by then, the right amount of international funding facilitated by the EU will be coming in the DC for the mineral sector. So yes, I'd say by 2030, if all those things are in place, we'll be there.
Great. So I know that Alex is an optimist, so I'm hoping she's also going to end us on a good note.
That's why you ended it with me. Yes, I am an optimist, but I'll borrow the yes if I may. I think yes, I remain optimistic. I think the if is if we can really harness the energy, the enthusiasm, and the power that sits in this room, as well as beyond it. I think if we can properly do that, that we'll find that there's a lot more that unites us on this issue than that divides us. And I really hope we're coming back in 2030 with a lot of progress to share.
Great, excellent. Thank you very much to our panel for ending such a positive note, and I hope that the audience also shares this optimism, but also takes it as a responsibility on themselves to make this happen, because it's not just these representatives here, but everyone in the room, including, for instance, if you're investors, if you're traders, you're also part of this puzzle. So thank you to our audience as well, but mostly thank you to our panel for staying the course. And enjoy. Oh yes, I'd like to end by thanking our panelists with a little gift of appreciation.
No. Is it Cobalt?
No, not Cobalt. A Turkish gift.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Obviously, a lot of issues, a lot of topics raised, some really interesting points that I know some in the audience may not have heard before. Maybe a few eyebrows raised, a few smiles of agreement. Is the panel all happy to continue this conversation over coffee? Would you be happy if anyone approaches you and has, because I've seen a couple of people getting their business cards out ready to approach you for further conversations. So are you all happy if you're approached? Fantastic, lovely. Thank you very much. And I hope that that means that those conversations can continue, because as we've heard so many times, both yesterday and particularly today, it's having the right people in the room and having that open dialogue. So let's get those conversations going over coffee.